Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I'm Mateo311 and this is your one channel for everything VR related. Today, we have some first impressions for the VR MMO alpha for Ilysia. I'll also be comparing this game to another upcoming VR MMO, Zenith. Full disclosure, I consider myself very friendly with Ilysia's developers, Team 21 Studio. I definitely respect these guys, but at the same time, I will not let that impact my overall opinion. So both Zenith and Ilysia are currently in alpha states, so obviously this isn't a review, nor am I trying to say which one is better. I'm just looking to detail the current state of each project, and you can decide which one is right for you. I covered Zenith in a separate video. I'll pop up a card for that if you want to check it out. And there will be timestamps included in the description if you want to jump around this video. Okay, so let's not waste any more time and get right into this, starting with some basic information on both titles. Zenith and Ilysia both had successful Kickstarter campaigns, which not only reached their respective goals, but also hit many stretch goals. Both games have also recently had their first alpha play session, and it's already clear there's some major differences between the two titles. In terms of development, Zenith appears to be much further along, and its alpha state felt much more like a stable beta. Ilysia, on the other hand, felt much more like a traditional alpha. The framework of the world was there, you can see the overall direction of the development team, but many components were not fully fleshed out or available for testing during the alpha. This was a bit concerning because Team Studio 21 is planning to release Ilysia by this December, and that seems like a monumental task from where they currently are. Major components of the game are still in a state of flux, and Ilysia is a lot more ambitious than Zenith. Now, they haven't actually committed to a full release in December, so it's most likely this will be a beta release. For better or worse, Zenith is an extremely traditional MMO. Brain-dead enemy AI, grindy combat, linear character progression, and very few components specific to VR. If you're a fan of MMOs and VR, you'll enjoy Zenith, but it's just an MMO from a VR perspective. Ilysia, on the other hand, plans to use a lot more VR-specific elements. Unfortunately though, I've only been told about most of these mechanics and haven't been able to test them just yet. This includes things like vision changes for different player races, motion controller crafting, and gesture-based spellcasting. I did try that in an earlier build, but it wasn't available in the current alpha. But there was one cool mechanic that I did get to test out, and this was the role that armor plays during combat. Humanoid creatures will wear armor, and many creatures have a natural form of armor. Striking these areas will do little to no damage, so your aim becomes so much more important during combat. This will also be a major component for in-game PvP. You'll have to strike an enemy in its armor weak points to do any real damage. Now, Zenith doesn't appear to have PvP on their radar at all, and this is just the beginning of a long list of differences between these two titles, which is exactly the topic we're about to jump into. How do Ilysia and Zenith differ, starting with their overall design process? From here, I'm going to speculate based on my observations, but it looks like Ramen VR set out to build something truly special with Zenith, but at some point were either forced to, or just decided to move towards something more traditional. Nearly 2 years ago, on a live stream interview with Eric for President, they described a wildly different game. They wanted you to feel like a living creature in a very active world, not like you were just playing a game. They planned for an extensive character customization system, voice modulation, and interactive NPCs that did a lot more than just hand out quests. Most of their development was done in the dark, so we don't really know what hurdles they encountered or when things began to shift. It's still possible we can see some of these items later down the road, but overall the scale has changed. Ilysia, on the other hand, was all about building a large open world for people to do what they wanted. It was built around constant community feedback, and the title has been actively accessible to myself and hundreds of Patreon members for quite some time now. This has led the team to rethink many design choices along the way, and they're constantly redesigning to maximize the overall VR implementation. Now, this sounds absolutely amazing, but I'm afraid that Team Studio 21 might still be in that big ambition stage that Zenith was ultimately forced to abandon. Let's hope I'm wrong about that, and move on to how these two titles handle their class systems. For Zenith, we're once again looking at a classic approach. They're using the Holy Trinity and separating everyone into tank, DPS, and healer. You'll unlock skills in a linear manner, and your strength basically grows exponentially. On the other hand, Ilysia completely forgoes the traditional class system and lets you be whatever you want. This is their free forge class system, which does include some skills that fit into those traditional roles, but it's all about making whatever you want. As you level up, you'll spend points in skills you like using. This could be melee combat, spellcasting, crafting, or even your overall athletics. You can even make a jack of all trades character, but you will end up limiting your high level skills. I love this ambitious approach, but I fear it could be a nightmare to balance. Now the class system moves us right into combat, which unfortunately isn't looking great for either title right now. Again, Zenith has that tried and true MMO approach. Mobs of enemies stand out in the open, waiting to be pulled in by the team's tank, sync issues make collision detection look non-existent, and it's an absolute grind fest. Gesture-based spellcasting is pretty cool and fairly accurate, but I rarely felt deeply engaged. By launch, I do expect combat to improve slightly, but the fundamentals will not change. Larger boss battles felt basically the same, with the added mechanics of avoiding AoE indicators, and some more reliance on your class skills for survival. At its core, combat feels more like a game of math, and if you're familiar with some classic MMOs, you'll know what I'm talking about. Ilysia, on the other hand, is a bit more realistic and chaotic. Due to enemy armor, you never know exactly when a strike will connect. Aim becomes significantly more important, and without predetermined classes, combat feels more like a straight up brawl rather than a choreographed fight. Now in truth though, I've only seen a glimpse of the combat system in its current alpha state. Spellcasting was not available in this build, enemy aggro was still being tweaked, and a boss fight that I had was completely broken. So I'm definitely intrigued in the direction Ilysia is going, but overall there's very little for me to judge right now. Okay, so let's move into some other design elements like equipment, in-game HUD, quest notifications, and the overall feel of the game. Surprise, surprise, Zenith is once again fairly standard. Most items look similar, but there are cosmetic and stat differences. Items have level locks, and they get exponentially more powerful. Visually, your low-level pew 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 laser beams will look the same at high level, but the amount of damage they deal are significantly different. If Zenith allowed a low-level character to equip the highest gear in the game, they would be at a huge advantage. Now this is not the case with Ilysia. You can equip the best gear on a level 1 character, and you will still be pretty pathetic on the battlefield. Your true combat prowess comes from the skills you unlock while leveling up. Now in-game, things also feel a lot different. Zenith will hold your hand throughout this title. There's big giant quest indicators letting you know exactly where to go, and it just keeps that grind fest going. This does, however, make the game much more approachable than Ilysia. Ilysia gives you a basic tutorial, and then you're in the world, and it's like, go figure out what you want to do, who you want to be, explore, kill things, go. There's basically no HUD at all, no quest indicators, and you might be wondering what you're supposed to do next. Now this may change a bit over time, but this is the approach the development team is going for. It's an experience where you enter the world and just become the character you want to be. Personally, this isn't ideal for me. I'm someone who gets frustrated if I spend an hour not making any progress, and it's the reason why I don't spend much time in games with no direct objective. You know, titles like VR Chat. Now there are still those traditional kill 10 bad guy quests that you find in every single MMO, but the team is aiming to avoid that overall content. And the final major difference between these titles is graphically. Zenith is JRPG inspired, you see that with the bright colors, futuristic world and weapons, and it's a style you may love or hate. Ilysia is much more fantasy oriented, something like Dungeons and Dragons or Lord of the Rings. It's a much more realistic looking world that's inhabited by monstrous creatures. Now world building is at the heart of Ilysia, and you can notice this throughout the entire game. There's something to look at almost everywhere you go. They really want you to sit back and take in the world. The overall ambiance, including the audio, is excellent, and you do feel a bit transported. While Zenith looks great, I rarely stop to admire anything, and the environment was just the area in which I'm killing lots of bad guys. So at this point, I think it's time to wrap everything up and just give you my overall opinion. Both of these titles are extremely different. Zenith is the safe bet. At launch, I bet it will be a lot more streamlined than Ilysia. It's also a game you've played many times before. Now Ilysia, on the other hand, is a big ambition opportunity. I can't say if everything's gonna pan out. They're making some really big promises, and there's always the fear that they'll overpromise and underdeliver. At the same time, they really want to emphasize VR mechanics and are operating under constant user feedback. Luckily though, it's not like you have to pick a title right now, and I'm gonna have a lot more content on this game in the near future. So I'm wishing both Ramen VR and Team Studio 21 the best, because the wildly different approaches are making something for everyone. Okay everybody, that was today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments. I will answer them. I could have easily spent another 20 minutes on both of these titles, and I know I glossed over a lot of subjects. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing. Okay everybody, I will see you on next time.